healthcare brands should always not just leave their research work in journals or keep it somewhere. They can always repurpose this content and spread it across different channels on forums, YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere, everywhere, and reach more patients. Hi, I'm Rosemary Osuoha, and this is SEO in 2026.
Rosemary, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
So my tip is centered around how healthcare brands can use AI and SEO to reach more patients using research papers.
Okay, so why healthcare brands?
Okay, because first of all, I'm a healthcare professional, I'm a pharmacist, and I also happen to be in SEO. I've been on two sides, from the healthcare perspective and from the SEO perspective. I've seen that research papers are always publicized in academic journals, and that's it. It's not always repurposed. So it happened to me I used to make that mistake, but over time I realized that, this can be a real content engine. And that's what I want to share today in this podcast.
Okay, so what are the key areas in terms of why it's different and beneficial for healthcare brands to use AI to reach more patients?
Okay, so most times healthcare brands heavily invest in research. There's always a research work being done. There's always an innovation. There's always an investigation. So sometimes those research can be beneficial to patients, but they don't normally. Patients always come to ask and they Google their symptoms most of the time. So if you are not putting those research works where your patients are, it becomes a problem because you are losing money and patients are not getting the right information from an authority source. So that's what I'm actually here to talk about.
Okay, and just so that it's relevant for as many people listening to this content, reading this content as possible, what other industries, categories of business would you say this advice is quite relevant for as well?
Okay, aside from healthcare brands, any business that heavily invests in research works. It also works for them. People who, do research papers, people who research about things and have as in stats to back up their claim, it's also relevant to them. So instead of just leaving it maybe in Google Scholar, you can also repurpose that into long form content and then redistribute it across different social medias, YouTubes and all that. So it's also relevant to them as well, besides healthcare brands.
Lovely. Okay, so let's have a look into the different pieces of advice, and maybe shall we start off with research paper findings? So what format do they appear in, and how do you use AI to assist your SEO with that?
Okay, so a research paper, let me start by defining what it says. From this, I'm talking from the clinical point of view. Now, a research paper, usually it's a document that contains like an experiment that has been done, an investigation based on a specific topic. And it usually contains like a title, an abstract, a method, discussion, a conclusion. So the title is the title of the work. The abstract is like a brief summary. The method is the procedure at which you use to attain that work. And then the discussion is like trying to relate your findings from the results. So now the question is, you asked, so what was what you asked again? Sorry, I want to know if I'm in line with it.
Yes, no, absolutely. So I was just looking for a brief definition of the research paper beforehand. Maybe the length of content, what's typically in that content, and then how you take that content and adapt it using AI to enhance your SEO.
Okay, yeah, okay. So I've described what the research paper is and how it looks like ideally. So the next thing I usually do is to, go search for relevant research works that are relevant to my brand. So, for example, if I have an organization that already invests in research work, I just need to filter through. But if I don't, I have to go to a journal site that already has this research work, like PubMed, for example. So when I go to PubMed, the next thing is to, impute a keyword there. And the keyword you are imputing has to be related to your organization's goals. So let me break it down. For example, say I am selling a vitamin D supplement, or I'm a supplement company. I sell a vitamin D supplement. I'm going to impute my pain points into PubMed, searching like vitamin D deficiency, for example, search that kind of keywords in PubMed, then filter through to 5 years, research work that are related in the last 5 years. I want my work to feel, relevant and new. So after getting that, I then pick that content, read through the results. Sometimes it can have a lot of jargon. So that's where AI comes in. So I pick that work, impute it in AI and tell AI to like break it down in such a way that a layman can understand. And AI does a good job at that. So I understand the work, I understand the results. I can then ask AI to, give me blog ideas. Also, I can take it further to tools like SEMrush to also ask to, fan out a query format that can address the pain points of my readers at every point. So that will now give me an holistic point of view. Then I now write the topic. You can also use AI to create the content brief, right? But you have to write the topic. You have to write it yourself. So I write the topic. Usually it's long form, maybe 2,000 words, 3,000, depending. So it's just about being brief as much as possible and, attacking the headings very succinct and nice. So after that, I then, take this work and ask if for the distribution, I then, tell AI to, create a YouTube script, a social media caption, everywhere my users are or my readers tend to engage. In forums, I can also tell it to create a summary that can be pasted in forums. So it's just like having one idea or one work and then, publicizing it across different channels.
Okay, so a couple of questions in relation to that. You use the word impute quite a bit as well, which isn't that common, really, certainly in relation to SEO. So by that, I assume you mean represent. So you're trying to train AI on what your brand and what your content represents.
When I use impute, like, key in, when you type on ChatGPT, please use this to do this. You can also, train AI as in a custom GPT. That's when you've done it over and over again, using your brand tone, your brand voice and everything. But
training it on what the brand represents, training it on, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So that's basically what I mean by impute, like entering it, like giving it a prompt. A prompt is the right word, a prompt. Giving it a prompt.
Okay. And what I don't really also understand is why you're manually creating 2,000 word articles when you've already got the research. So surely you've produced the original content through the research. So can you not use AI, and if you're training them in tone of voice, get AI to produce the blog content based upon the research paper that you have?
So over time, I've seen that AI forgets. So if you have a custom GPT already and you keep using it, over time it manipulates figures, it manipulates facts. You get. So most time, because it's a health niche, it's your money, your life. So it's usually better to handwrite it. But it makes it faster when you already have like a research work there. So it's not really that long. It doesn't take that long duration like it's supposed to when you don't have the research work. So it makes it faster. You understand? So it's just to stay safe.
Understood. Okay, and you also use AI to, I guess, harness the power of FAQs from the clinic. So how does that work?
Okay, so the FAQs from clinic actually comes from based on observation from healthcare professionals and not from the patient. If a health organization wants to utilize FAQs from patients, they have to demand for, permission to do that based on HIPAA laws. But if not, it basically is about what a healthcare professional or the team has observed over time. Okay, we observed that, for example, one time we observed that a specific brand was being an over-the-counter, like a flu medication, was being used as a contraceptive. Like people thought it was a contraceptive. So in one organization I worked for, then we now had to, okay, let us check, is this really true? We checked online. Luckily, there was a work already on it. So what we did was now to use that work to create a blog content. So if you want to use questions that are already from a patient, you have to demand their approval. You have to tell them, okay, we're going to use this. Do you give us permission to use this? You get. But if it's based on just observations from healthcare team. Okay, we think this is just being conscious enough. I think that can flow as well. So you just get those questions. You can also input it and prompt it into LLMs to now, fan out a blog cluster.
Understood. Okay. And you also take presentations and case studies, and I guess use AI to turn them into other content as well. So what do you do there?
So for case studies, for where case study comes in is when there's a rare occasion, a very rare, maybe a rare condition that's probably us healthcare professionals have studied in school, and all of a sudden we saw this kind of case. In that scenario, what we do first of all is to, talk to the patient. We want to use this to do this. Do you give us permission? Pending what the person says, but most times they are usually happy because they are fine and well. So they'll say yes, and then you can then fine tune it. You get. So it will not be like publicly putting. We can just say something like, a patient walked up to us, not exactly calling out the person's name. A patient walked up to us with this condition. This is that. This was how our team handled it. This, that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Not outrightly calling out the person. So where the person comes in is when the person say a review. Say we ask the person to give a testimonial on it and says, okay, please can you drop us a review or a testimonial that we want to feature on the blog concerning this. The person can now say okay, and pending the review, we can then impute that, we can then add that to the blog to increase the EAT signal. So that's what we do there.
Okay, so I'd like to go back to your process of what you do after you create long form content. So obviously you use your research paper and perhaps your case study as a basis for creating your long form blog content, maybe about 2,000 words or something like that. But then you take this blog content and you use AI to turn that into social media posts. So what's your process for that? And where do you find publishing this content to be most effective at the moment?
Okay, so first, what I just do is to copy. I copy the content, and I tell ChatGPT or any LLMs and say, okay, I want to post this on maybe LinkedIn or TikTok. Can you create a social media post that is conversational? This one is based on what your brand tone is. So I also add my brand tone there to make it sound human. And then it gives me something that is good. Sometimes I have to rewrite to make it better. So for channels that I found that to be more engaging, I've seen it to be more engaging on Facebook, TikTok, and sometimes LinkedIn. So, but these channels have unique way of representing content. So LinkedIn will come from the professional angle, say Facebook will come from another angle. So, but LLM does a very good job at, fine-tuning based on, the different social media handles. So what you just do for Instagram, you put more of videos, more of pictures in addition. LinkedIn, you might just need a text or so, maybe a carousel, and to, just give a brief overview of the topic. On YouTube, you have to, shoot a video. So you can use AI to create the script, the video. You can also, create a webinar topic, like an invite. You can also repurpose it into a newsletter that you send to your patients. It's just one way to redistribute. And for every time, you have to include your brand tone and everything so that it is in alignment with your organization. So what AI does is just to speed up the process and make it less of a hassle.
And in terms of the type of content that you're finding resonates best or gets more engagement at the moment, are you also using video content as part of this?
Yes, video content, yes. I also use video content. And the video content also, it comes in most times webinars. So we just saying, okay, we're having a webinar, we're talking about this, or we are demystifying a myth. Okay, click here to join. Sometimes we record these sessions and just put on YouTube, oh, this is our session on this, we educated this, that. You understand? Sometimes it can just be a normal tutorial on YouTube. So it depends on the season, I would say, or how best the research work is at the time. So that's just what I can say.
Rosemary, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Okay, so my key takeaway is that healthcare brands should always not just leave their research work in journals or kept it somewhere, they can always repurpose this content and spread it across different channels on forums, YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere, and reach more patients. So that's my key takeaway.
Rosemary Osuoha is an SEO specialist for healthcare brands. Find out more over at meandyoupharma.com. Rosemary, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.